We humans have tried many things over the last few hundred years to effectively manage our stormwater. Getting water away from our buildings and into our streams as efficiently as possible was the name of the game until the 1980s. As impervious surface increased and stormwater caused flooding and erosion problems, we began to collect water in stormwater ponds during large storms and then slowly let it out into streams after the storm event. Those ponds were partially successful, but they did nothing to solve the flooding or erosion problems and did very little to treat the pollutants in the stormwater. In the late 1990s and into the 2000s, stormwater professionals started to think about different ways that they could treat stormwater. This shift in thinking led us to try to contain stormwater farther up in the landscape, closer to buildings and throughout our communities, closer to where the water actually was falling. These practices, which range from rain barrels to bioretentions, treat stormwater in various ways and slowly release it into our waterways. The Stormwater Management Act of 2007 required all new and redevelopment in Maryland to follow environmental site design. Environmental site design requires designers to retain environmental features such as forests, reduce impervious surfaces, and incorporate as many small-scale best management practices as possible. The main goal of environmental site design is to create hydrological conditions that would be similar to what would have happened on-site prior to development. The community of Millstone Village, which was built in 2014, is a great example of a community developed using environmental site design. When the homes were built, runoff from their roofs and from the streets were all pushed into smaller scale best management practices such as bioretentions and bioswales. Each of the roofs of each of these townhomes divert their stormwater into downspouts that output into a swale that connects all of their impervious surfaces. The water flows through the swale and into the bioretention where it fills up the basin. The basin acts as a large bathtub that slowly releases the water out through layers of engineered soil, gravel, and ultimately into its perforated underdrain. As water fills the basin, it is slowly released out through the underdrain, and in an emergency situation, these bioretentions are also designed to allow water to get out over an emergency overflow. Communities, often led by volunteer HOAs, are required to maintain these practices. They often don't understand what practices they have or how best to maintain them. Further, this lack of information often leads HOAs to underestimate the cost of maintaining these practices and how to spot small things that can lead to larger problems down the road, which oftentimes are more expensive.
In 2018, in November to be exact, is when I assumed the role of the HOA president, and Lord and behold, my first duty was to be inundated with the inspector from Anne Arundel County. And we walked around the community and he pointed out to us that we had a lot of issues that we had failed. One actually was happening in our rain garden where we were having a lot of stormwater water that was holding in our rain garden area, and it would not go away, which was causing us to have a lot of mosquitoes and other parasites. Another area that was of a major concern was our swells, which happened to be behind the houses within Millstone Village. The community on the cul-de-sac area were not able to really go in their backyards because of that standing water. But we had inlets that were not cleaned out properly. Our riprap wasn't laid right. It had silt on it. Another one was our porous pavement. A lot of communities are sitting on high water tables, which means there's a lot of water underneath, and that water has to flow somewhere. So some of our homeowners, especially in the cul-de-sac areas and the houses, they could start to get to a point where they would experience flooding. We have sump pumps that were running continuously. Yes, there were penalties, and I will say that Anne Arundel County really worked with us as long as we stay in touch with them. They have been working with us through this process, but they stated to us that we would get a hefty fines if we did not do certain things. So our community was able to cover the porous pavement areas that was requested. We were able to clean the silt out and cut it around and get the riprap laid down. The rain garden and the swells still remain our issue. So a couple of things took place. One, I had an engineer come out because I didn't understand what was really happening, what these different systems were about. So after doing that, I had a reserve study done because I wanted to understand what the community ultimately would be responsible for as it related to this, because it had never been a part of our let's just say our cost in the community. So after I did that, actually it was one of my neighbors who had did some homework, and she came back and spoke about the Watershed Academy. So we were like, well, what is that? So we went into doing some homework. I had an opportunity to come out and sit in one of the orientations and learn about what we could do possibly to learn about our community. So I summoned my husband to take on the task of taking on this class so that we could learn, and that's when we started learning about some of the resolutions. I highly recommend when you step in to understand what's in your community. It was a cost. It cost us like $1,500 to talk to the engineer, but talking to the designer of our community helped us to understand what systems were put in, why it was designed the way it was designed. We also learned in the budget that the cost for maintaining these areas was not ever really identified. So we had to go back and really look at our budget, and that's where the reserve study came in. It helped us to understand what systems we have to repair in what period of time. That will give us a chance to ensure that we have enough money in our reserve account so that we will be able to do these as they come along, that won't be really taxing on our community or require us to do some sort of special assessment.
If we can get the people to volunteer in their community in order to resolve issues, then we not only help save on the budget for the community, but also help resolve issues that each other may be experiencing, such as the standing water and the sump pumps issues. If we can get people involved and to be aware, and that's where it all starts, with awareness.
I would highly suggest for someone to really do the research, be aware of what's going on, and get involved and stay involved, because and the HOA is everybody, it's not just the board of directors.